On the docks at Attu, 192 miles from Kiska and 1,099 miles from Nome, fresh troops debark and unload ammunition and equipment. Linesmen of the Signal Corps erect telephone poles for a communication system from Alexei Point to Massacre Bay. Heavy snowstorms blanket the area. Snow plows clear the runway. Hot air blowers are used to de-ice the planes. During the night of March 10, 1944, counterattacking Japanese troops recaptured Hill 700 on the perimeter of our Torokino beachhead on Bougainville Island. The hill is very important to the success of the Battle of Bougainville, since its heights command a view of all Allied positions within the perimeter. All opposing Japanese positions may also be seen from the top. After a 5-day battle, during which tanks, flamethrowers, and artillery were used, the Japs were dislodged from the hill. At the command of General Harmon, these pictures were taken under fire by the 13th Army Air Force's Combat Camera Unit. These are troops of the 144th Infantry coming up to replace the 145th Infantry. They are under enemy mortar fire and are taking cover against the embankment. A public address system is installed in an effort to persuade the Japs on the other side to come down and surrender. Japanese-American soldiers speak to the enemy over the loudspeaker. This device has had some success, but this time the only response is 90mm mortar fire. Flamethrowers, in conjunction with hand grenades and rifles, neutralized Jap pillboxes. At the same time, American casualties, which had been taken to the rear in an armored half-track, are transferred to ambulances or jeeps to be taken to the hospital. Ammunition and supplies are loaded into the same half-tracks, which then make the half-mile return trip to the front lines. Because of enemy snipers, the half-tracks are the only safe means of transportation to the front. The full force of the flamethrower is directed against Jap pillboxes, while other men wait with cocked rifles and hand grenades should the enemy try to escape into the jungle. Light and medium tanks go into action against the Japs. These pictures were taken through the periscope of a light tank, which is under enemy mortar and light arms fire. These Jap positions surround one of our anti-aircraft gun emplacements. As quickly as possible, our casualties are taken to treatment stations behind the lines for immediate attention. The terrain is almost impassable, and the men are under constant sniper and mortar fire. Those that can make the trip under their own power. After their wounds have been treated at the dressing station, the casualties are taken down the hill to the road, where they are placed in a half-track and moved to the rear. Jap mortar fire. Snipers work. 14 American dead were removed from this point in one day. Japanese land mines are removed and rendered ineffective. These are homemade Japanese hand grenades, improvised from captured U.S. ammunition. The enemy suffered heavy casualties during this engagement. About 500 dead Japs were found at their hilltop positions. Some of their trenches were piled high with bodies, partially covered with dirt from exploding hand grenades. This Jap was stopped by rifle fire. Jeeps, converted to ambulance work, bring our casualties down the road from the front. These men have already been given emergency treatment and are on their way to the receiving hospital. The more seriously wounded are taken immediately to the airstrip, where C-47s, complete with all necessary medical supplies and attendants, are waiting to transport them to large hospitals in the rear. Objective, Saipan in the Mariana Island Group, 1,465 miles from Tokyo. On May 21st at Hawaii, air engineers prepared for the invasion of Saipan. In many ways, this was to be the most important objective yet taken in any drive across the Pacific. Its capture would cut off the Carolines from their supply line and end Jap southward aerial traffic, would give us a firm springboard for new westward blows. Saipan would be the largest and perhaps best defended island these forces had ever assaulted. For the next few days, great quantities of vital equipment were loaded on LSTs, and by June 10th, they were lying in the Kwajalein Lagoon, awaiting formation of the convoy, while at the southern tip of Saipan, D-Day troops were this very morning swarming ashore. By June 17th, the convoy was nearing Saipan. Gunnery practice and constant watch were maintained in enemy waters near Truk and Ponape. When the convoy arrived at Saipan, it was attacked at dusk by Jap carrier planes in the initial phase of a major naval engagement. When it ended 3 days later, the Japs had lost more than 400 planes, more than a score of ships, including some of their largest and finest carriers, which were sunk or damaged. Vessels that had moved out to sea to evade possible attack now returned to unload. LCTs were launched from the decks of LSTs, vanguard of all the equipment that was to make the lower end of Saipan a secure and busy base for the final push to the north. Engineers went shoreward in Higgins boats to blast coral reefs to facilitate beaching of larger craft. And as alligators and buffaloes and power equipment headed for the beaches, the Japs, abandoned by their own defeated naval force, were burrowing into the central uplands to stand against our drive up the rest of the island. From this point on, supplies flowed ashore at the rate of 10,000 tons a day, while the Jap-held islands of Tinian, Guam, and Rota were attacked daily to prevent the Japs from using their airfields to launch planes against us. LCTs ferried heavy tanks ashore. Yellow Beach, where the engineers landed their troops and equipment, showed the results of shelling and invasion. Ashore, large stores of equipment were assembled in preparation for the reconstruction work to be done. A Slido airfield and a secondary field at Chiran-Kanoa had been captured on June 19th after extremely bitter fighting. Hangars were ruined, and many Jap planes had been wrecked. Other planes, still in good condition, were shipped by the Navy back to the United States. First renamed Conroy Field, Aslido was later renamed Isley Field in honor of a commander killed while leading a bombing attack against the Saipan airdrome. Ground men of a fighter group unpacked their equipment in a Jap hangar as the first P-47 came into land at Aslido, even while shells burst nearby. By the 20th, a day and a half after capture, both Aslido and Chiran-Kanoa airstrips were in use. P-47s flew from the unimproved runway while engineers worked to put the field in shape. A ditch was dug to carry a gas line from the fuel storage tanks to the field. The fighters were equipped with rocket launchers to help rout out the Japs who were firmly entrenched in caves. By June 22nd, we held about half of Saipan's 75 square miles, including Mount Topachau, which dominates the center of the island. By June 25th, Asleto Airfield had been extended 1,000 feet. Its shoulders were widened and steel matting had been laid. The whole job took the engineers a day and a half. For the most part, we had vitiated Jap air power, but the arrival of P-61s was welcome to counteract night raiders. By July 4th, Saipan fell, opening the way for rapid advance to the island's northeastern tip. This first important Jap city to be occupied by U.S. forces was Saipan's capital and administrative center for the Marianas, home of most of its 20,000 civilians. Thousands of civilians with their children streamed through a designated safety zone to the comparative luxury of internment camps, where they were treated as prisoners of war and given medical aid, food, and clothing. On the night of June 25th, a small body of Jap snipers crept through our lines and caused considerable damage to the parked planes before being killed. Concealed by cane fields that bordered the airstrip, the Japs had attacked and damaged planes with hand grenades and bayonets. Bulldozers and Tommy gunners cleaned out the cane fields, and by July 9th, the last remnants of Jap resistance on the island had ended. The conquest of Saipan had been the costliest since Tarawa, but it was one of the most significant victories in the Pacific.